The house that I'm in now, I built as a single mum of 5 children. It wasn't easy, but I want you to know that it's possible. This is not a brag video, although I'm incredibly proud of my achievement and my capacity to be able to provide that safety and stability. But I want to tell you how I did it so that you might be able to pick pieces out of my story. There will be parts of my story that you say, I don't have access to that. I didn't get that. I don't, I'm not privileged enough or didn't have enough or whatever. There are always pieces in people's stories where they have more access to what you had. But there are also pieces where I will have less access to what you might be able to now. And that may be around different schemes that the government offers, credit rating, just things like that. So don't listen to my story and go, oh, it's okay for her. She had that, or she was able to do that, or that was available to her. Just take away that it's possible. I had to do a lot of research. There was a lot of steps along the way. And I did buy my first house with my ex-husband back in 2011. So yes, it was a much different housing market. But the best time to buy a house is 10 years ago. The next best time is now. The housing market will always increase. It will always get harder. But you just have to put plans in place. Know that it will take time, but the time passes anyway. So back in 2011, we did buy our first house. Now, I do want to let you know that before we bought that house, we were living in public housing in New South Wales. He was not working. He was getting the parenting payment from Centrelink, and I was working. So we were lucky enough to be able to access a community-based home loan scheme. That was back then. At the moment, particularly in New South Wales, single parents do have access to a 2% home loan deposit thing. I would absolutely encourage you to book an appointment with a mortgage broker who can assess your options. And usually those sessions are for free. I have used it. I have a mortgage broker who is a friend of mine who I was able to talk to about what my income was, what my expenses were, what I needed as a deposit, and how I could make it work. So utilize the help that's out there. Same with a financial counselor. If your credit rating isn't great, if you have debt that is from a previous relationship, organize to see a financial counselor, because particularly if there's domestic violence involved, you can sometimes get some of those debts wiped. If you can get a letter from a support agency to identify or verify that you experienced domestic violence and the debt was as a result of that relationship. So there are things along the way. Just make it possible for you. I wanted to buy a home because we had 5 children. And I was so worried about being at the mercy of a landlord, having to move if the landlord wanted to move back in, or, they had to sell the home. So that is originally why we got into public housing, because of the stability, the safety, the security of it. When I was working, we weren't eligible for the subsidized rent. We were paying market rent. But I did find access to a community-based kind of home loan organization place that allowed us to use the first homeowners grant, which was $7,000 back then. And I was able to use my tax refund to be able to come up with the deposit. Because we were living in public housing, we were eligible for reduced stamp duty. Still had to pay conveyancing and, solicitors' fees and things like that. But I scrimped and scraped, and we have sacrificed along the way. So we did buy a home for, I think it was $310,000 with this small deposit, and I was working full time. He was not. So we just made it work. We moved in. I was already living with violence and abuse. Police had been called before that. I didn't know how much longer this relationship was going to last. We were only in the home 8 months together before there was a huge blow up. I needed police intervention. He did threaten my life. It was a bit of a dramatic, my workplace had to be locked down. It was pretty dramatic. So after that, a judge or police applied for a no contact, no approach AVO, and the relationship was done. So then that was only after 8 months. Luckily for me, I was the one who was working. So I was able to pay the mortgage on my own, 100% of the mortgage, because he decided not to contribute. I also did not get any child support. I claimed an exemption through Centrelink because I had the AVO, and I just did not want any part of taking any money from him. I know it was for his children, but when there's abuse and violence and control, I just wanted to leave out any sort of anything that he could use to try and maintain contact with me, or to, tell people that I was doing this, doing that, taking money from him, whatever. So no child support. I paid the mortgage on my own. I got lots of advice from legal. I didn't realize that by the time we did property settlement that everything I had paid onto the mortgage myself did not actually count towards what our split was going to be. So it did become evident that the best thing to do was going to be to sell the home. I had to do a lot of planning around that. I did at one point stop paying the mortgage on the advice of a solicitor because it was not going to contribute anything towards my piece of it anyway. And I was actually putting that money into renovating the house, just trying to update, painting, flooring, just things like that so that I could sell. It also was a big draw card for me to move out of that home where he knew where I lived, down the coast to a much quieter and what I perceived to be safer, better lifestyle for my children. He didn't know where we moved to eventually, and so that felt a lot safer for me. I did sell that home in one market and then be able to buy a block of land in, I don't want to say lesser market, but because the block of land or the area that I wanted to move to was away from sort of public transport and infrastructure. It's a regional town. It's a small regional town. So obviously prices were cheaper. And I made that decision because that was just going to be the best fit financially for us. And so at the time that I was renovating the home and I had borrowed money to be able to fund, some of those renovations, like retiling the bathroom, just, things like that, bit of landscaping, a bit of sprucing, I guess. I was renting down here where we live at the moment and renovating that house and traveling back and forth to work. We sacrificed, had no money. Like everything was going on to rent, into the house, and just trying to move through this next step of our life. So my children never got, the latest phones. They, I'm sure that they were in clothes that were they were not in designer clothes or designer shoes. There were lots of sacrifices, lots. I know now that my children did avoid telling me about excursions at school. They didn't get canteen money, but it was all for a greater purpose, but they still had to sacrifice a lot as well. And so once we completed property settlement, I did pay him out a sum of money. It was more than what I wanted to, but at the end of the day, I just needed it done. It was more than what he deserved, really, since I was paying the entire mortgage. I mean, it was my deposit. Oh, sorry, well, it wasn't. It was our the first homeowners grant, which we were both eligible for, was my tax return money. But it wasn't about that. It was just, I needed to do what was right for me and my children. So we did agree on a sum of money. The house went on the market, sold, paid him out. I used my $30,000 to put a deposit on a block of land. Like I said, it was in a market, in an area which was coastal, cheaper because it was further away from town and things like that. That was the decision. I paid rent in a private rental and held that block of land for 12 months. I wanted to build equity in the land, and B, I wanted to just pay down, that mortgage on the land as much as possible, because as a single income earner with 5 dependents, the bank was not wanting to throw much money at me at all. And so I had to make it work. So sacrificed again. I continued working. We continued just with the end goal in mind of just trying to build. And at the time, it was cheaper for me to buy a block of land, sit on that, build the equity, and then build than it was to buy and to get a loan of, because obviously that was 2011, 2013, I think I sold the house. No, it must have been later. Oh, I should have written these down, sorry. But it was a period later, so obviously everything had gone up. Once I sat on the block for about 12 months, built the equity, paid it down, did all that. I went back to my bank and I said, right, how much can I get for a construction loan? And the bank came back to me with a figure which wasn't great, but it's what I had to work with. So what I did was I went to the home builder that I had been working with, or, checking out display homes and things like that. And he was wonderful. He was so understanding. And I said to him, I have this much money. And he just went, oh. But he said, we'll make it work. And so what we did was we found one of the house designs, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double car garage, which is pretty standard for a lot of sort of home builders like that. It was New Living Homes, so project builder. We found one on the lower end of the scale because that was my affordability. And we pulled out everything from the home, from the contract, to try and get my final cost underneath what the bank was willing to loan me. So we actually moved into this home that I'm sitting in right now without fly screens, without a clothesline, mailbox, curtains or blinds. We moved in without flooring. We lived on concrete floors that I painted just for the, aesthetic of it. We lived on concrete floors for 6 years with just rugs and things until I was able to afford to start laying floorboards in sections. Some of my home, we moved in 2017. Oh, so I would have bought the block of land in 2016. We moved in 2017, so we've been here 7 years now, and there are still some sections of my house, particularly my room, which do not have the floorboards finished. But we did what we had to do. There was no driveway, no landscaping, and I just did things in sort of stages or sections as we went. I actually made all of the fly screens for this house. I put in my own mailbox. I sorted the clothesline. I didn't get a driveway for a couple of years, and even now it's only a gravel driveway. It's not a concrete driveway. I had cheap blinds. I've only just upgraded the blind in my room to something, much more sturdy and solid and quality, because we just did what we had to do. And so when we moved, we actually moved in the pouring rain just by ourselves, because I was almost embarrassed about the situation I had found myself in, because the place that we were renting, despite the landlord telling me that it was their retirement home and, they would not be moving back down for a while, I did get an eviction notice. And look, I probably wasn't the best tenant either, because I just had so much trauma and so much stuff. And I was living in survival. but they wanted to move back in and I didn't have anywhere to go. I needed to wait for this house to be built. They did take me to the tribunal. They did threaten me with sheriffs. I felt so bad, but I also needed to have my babies in a house until I got the keys for this place. So we very much almost ended up, homeless for a short period of time. I probably would have had to sleep in my car. Well, we would have had to sleep in the car because I wouldn't have been able to rent something for 6 months knowing I was just days or weeks away from getting the keys. We made it work. I felt so bad. I'm probably blacklisted for renting because we way overstayed our, the sheriff was going to be coming over and the landlord was great in that I said, can I please just have the weekend? So we moved in the pouring rain. We have lived on, these concrete floors and just upgrading the house as we go. But it is ours and it provided a safety and a stability that I always just wanted for my kids and for myself. And yes, there is something to pass down. A couple of years after we moved in, I got really sick. I got burnt out at work, working as a child protection caseworker. I have an autoimmune condition. I have Crohn's disease, so it flared. I ended up in surgery and I ended up off work for 12 months. And things were really tight for a while there, but having access to, your mortgage, the bank was able to work with me about paying a reduced mortgage based on my income at the time. And then once I went back to work, then I was able to pay extra arrears on it and things like that to catch up. But I wouldn't have had that benefit had I been in private rental. And so I'm so thankful that we were able to do it. Like I said, it is a timeline of events. It did take time. It took huge sacrifices, but it was something that was really important to me after my mum and dad owned their home. And then after they divorced, my mum was unable to make the mortgage repayments on her own. They sold the house and then it did turn into just a merry-go-round of my mum moving to different private rentals for various reasons. And I didn't want that stress. And so while it created a lot, a different kind of stress in, trying to get enough income or save this and paying rent and mortgage and commuting to work and just, the kids got on the bus by themselves and they came home to an empty house and it was hard. It was hard for them. It was hard for all of us. But the end goal was worth it. And like I said, I would absolutely recommend you engage with a financial counselor if your credit rating is down, if you want to know how you are going to afford a home loan. Put a plan in place, put a budget in place. The time will pass anyway. See a mortgage broker, get that into place as well. What do you need to save? What does your income need to be? What might you be able to borrow? How can you make it work? You may have to buy something that is well below what you would want and then fix it up and things like that, but it'll be yours. And if you want the home ownership, then just make it work any way you can. So yes, there are things in there like my first home that I know people will be like, well, I didn't have access to that. And obviously I bought a block of land years ago when prices were lower. I get all that. Don't focus on those specifics. Just focus on it's possible. If you want it, you can make it possible. Right now, my 5 children still live here. Everybody, it's that safety and stability and the wealth that I can pass down, or, the asset that we have that my credit rating is crap due to a previous relationship, not my ex-husband, but my ex-partner. Credit rating is crap, so it's not like I can borrow onto it, but eventually when I clean up my credit rating, I'll have access to this equity. And so that's the end goal with this too. But I just want you to know that it's possible. Reach out for support. There is help and support out there. Anything's possible. You are significant because you are, and I love you because you exist. And I just want you to know that if you can dream it, you can do it.